"Sir, this area is reserved for designated family members. Please step back, or security will escort you out." That's what they told him. He didn't argue. He just stood there, wearing his old Marine Corps dress coat, holding a handwritten invitation from his son. "Dad, I want you in the front row." They thought he didn't belong there. But 6 Navy SEALs sitting silently in the 5th row, they knew exactly who he was. And when they stood, everything changed. Let's uncover what really happened. That morning, the June sunlight filtered through the oak trees of Redwood Falls, casting warm patches over the schoolyard where the graduation ceremony was being solemnly prepared. Flags fluttered, rows of chairs were neatly aligned, and red, white, and blue ribbons shimmered in the soft breeze. Families, friends, and soon-to-be graduates all dressed in their best walked around with bouquets or cameras in hand, excitedly searching for seats. And among the bustling crowd, one man moved slowly. He didn't come through the main gate. He didn't come with anyone. He quietly emerged from a side door at the far end of the hall, dressed in an old Marine dress uniform, the kind usually only seen in photos of the fallen. The jacket was faded with age, the collar slightly wrinkled, and the shoulders broader than his slender frame. His jeans were worn, his boots scuffed and thinning at the soles, completely out of place for the formal air of the event. Yet nothing about him felt out of place. He stood there, hands clasped behind his back, his calm gaze fixed on the stage. Not looking for anyone, not calling out, just standing like a forgotten part of the ceremony no one noticed, and no one dared disturb. His name was Michael Grant. He was nearly 68 years old. No one at the event knew who he was, only that he was making his way toward the clearly marked area, reserved for designated families. And as he approached the empty seats near the aisle, a young woman with a headset and staff shirt stepped in front of him. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. "Sir, this section is for guests whose names are on the list. If you don't have a badge, I'll have to ask security to escort you out." Without surprise, without protest, Michael gave a slight nod and pulled a small piece of paper from his coat. It was a handwritten note, the ink smudged in places, corners frayed. One line only. "Dad, I want you in the front row." But that held no weight for the event staffer. "No badge, no seat," she said, turning away. Michael didn't argue. Not a word. He simply stepped back, stood tall. His eyes remained fixed on the stage. Not angry, not hurt, just waiting for something he believed was right, even if the world around him refused to recognize it. Only 6 men in the 5th row and one woman named Sarah Thompson watched him quietly. And they knew this ceremony was no longer going to be just a graduation. Sarah Thompson, a mother in her early 50s, had just stepped out of her car. She gently smoothed the wrinkles from her dress creases formed during nearly 3 hours of highway driving. In her hand was a folded graduation program, carefully held like a treasured artifact. Among the long list of names, her eyes paused at one bolded line, "Ethan Grant, Dean's List." For weeks, she had stared at that line over and over again, as if still not quite believing it. The same son who once struggled with grades, who had dropped out mid-semester feeling lost, was now standing among the honored. Pride, emotion, and something else, something nameless, like her heart had swelled and was searching for a way to release the joy. She followed an usher to the middle section, 5th row from the front. It was the perfect seat, close enough to see each expression on stage, but far enough back to take in the full sweep of the ceremony. Sarah liked this perspective, being able to witness her son's growth, while also watching an entire generation step into their future. As she sat down, her eyes didn't go straight to the stage. Almost by habit, she took a moment to observe the crowd, fathers and mothers beaming with pride, grandparents embracing their grandchildren, little kids clutching balloons with wide-eyed wonder. And amidst the joyful buzz, she saw him, not entering through the main gate, not following any group. He had come in from a side door. A man in a weathered Marine dress coat, standing still under the soft glow of a red exit sign. He didn't look like anyone else there, and because of that, he couldn't be mistaken for anyone else. And that was the moment. Sarah Thompson knew this ceremony wasn't going to be like any other she had ever attended. He walked slowly, each step deliberate, as if measuring every brick beneath his feet. In the vibrant chaos of graduation, where people were adjusting ties, laughing aloud, holding up their phones to capture that once-in-a-lifetime moment when their child walked the stage, he seemed completely apart, like a quiet pause in the symphony of celebration. As he approached the honorary seating area, His eyes settled on an empty spot near the aisle, marked with a small plaque. Guest of honor. Still in his hand was the small invitation card, its edges frayed, one corner bent. Before he could take the seat, a young woman stepped in front of him. She wore a staff, shirt, headset, and a dangling name tag. Her tone was firm, though not impolite. Sir, this section is for guests on the official list only. If you don't have a pass, I'm going to have to ask you to step away. If necessary, security will assist. Michael Grant didn't flinch. He wasn't angry. He didn't explain. He simply gave a polite nod, then gently pulled a folded paper from inside his coat, setting it in front of him, not offering it, just laying it there like silent testimony. My son wrote this. Dad, I want you in the front row. But the young woman didn't even glance at it. Her eyes stayed locked on her clipboard as she repeated her script. No badge, no siat. So he stepped back, just one step, and stood still. No complaint, no retreat. His hands remained clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the stage, as if the world around him had ceased to matter. The crowd continued bustling, adjusting dresses, fixing ties, searching for the perfect camera angle. Almost no one noticed what had just happened. Almost. Except Sarah Thompson, seated in the fifth row. And 6 men, just a few seats to her right. None of them spoke. But none of them took their eyes off the man standing beneath the red exit sign. Sarah tilted her head, eyes narrowing. Something wasn't right. He didn't look lost. He looked like someone who knew exactly where he was, only the world hadn't caught up yet. She didn't know his name. She had no idea what he'd done. But she knew this much. That man wasn't there to cause trouble. Someone had made a mistake. And if no one else saw it, maybe she would be the first to speak up. The stage lights came up, and a voice echoed formally through the speakers. We'd like to welcome all parents, students, and honored guests to this year's graduation ceremony at Redwood Falls College. Applause erupted. Cameras clicked. All eyes turned toward the podium, where the dean was making a lighthearted joke about tuition costs. The auditorium burst into laughter. Except for Sarah Thompson. She wasn't laughing. Her gaze remained fixed on the back of the Hallen, the man in the old military uniform, standing motionless against the white wall beneath the red emergency exit light. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't look for assent. He just stood there, hands folded behind his back, like a soldier still on duty long after anyone had given him orders. At that moment, 2 event staff members passed by him. One leaned in and whispered to the other, eyes wary. He's still there. I really don't think he has an invitation. The other nodded calmly. Let security keep an eye on him. Big ceremonies like this, people wander in all the time. Sarah didn't hear those words with her ears, she felt them in her chest. A sharp ache, rising in her lungs. The kind you feel when something is deeply wrong, but you can't stop it right away. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was shame. A quiet, burning shame. The kind that stirs when someone is being pushed aside simply for not looking the way people expect someone important to look. And that Manny didn't look like a threat. He looked like someone who had lived through enough pain, enough injustice, to know that, sometimes, silence is the only way to hold on to your dignity. Sarah looked down her row. Everyone else was still adjusting camera angles, chatting, laughing, scrolling through photos. They didn't see what she saw, but 6 others did. 6 men, seated in the same 5th row. Their eyes had not left Michael Grant since the moment he stepped into the hall. They didn't speak, but their silence wasn't indifferent. It was focused, intentional, as if they knew exactly who he was, as if they were waiting. And in that moment, Sarah understood. This man hadn't come to demand anything. He had come because of a promise made by his son. And the only respect he hoped for was to stand exactly where his son had asked him to be. Nothing more, nothing less. And somehow, that simple hope seemed to be too much for a world that had grown far too used to judging appearances instead of depth. No one noticed the security guard walking toward him. No one turned when the clipboard was raised or when a firm but quiet voice came through the radio. No one, except Sarah Thompson and the 6 men in the 5th row. The old Marine still stood exactly as before, uniform neatly pressed, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the stage. Then came the voice of the security guard. Sir, if you don't leave this area, I'll have to escort you out. He didn't get angry. He didn't look shaken. He simply shook his head gently and said, calmly and clearly, I'm not causing trouble. My son invited me here, I won't leave until I see him walk across that stage. His voice was low and steady, unwavering. But it was clear the guard didn't quite know what to do with that kind of quiet resolve. Another staffer stepped beside him, reaching out a hand toward the old man's shoulder. That was when it happened. A soft scrape of a chair, then another, and then 4 more in rapid succession. All 6 men in the 5th row stood up. They didn't shout. They didn't raise signs or make a scene. But in the way they stood united, silent, and deliberate there, was something that froze the entire room for a moment. The man nearest the aisle stepped forward toward Michael Grant. He wasn't in uniform. Just a brown jacket, a baseball cap low over his eyes. But when he reached into his pocket and raised a small object, the lights above caught it just right. It gleamed the unmistakable trident emblem of the United States Navy SEALs. Not a badge, not a rank, but a symbol worn only by those who had walked through hell and survived. One by one, the other 5 men moved in behind him. Now, all 6 Navy SEALs stood shoulder to shoulder behind Michael Grant. They didn't need to say much. But the first man did speak, his voice low, resonant, like a command echoing across a battlefield. He's not leaving. This is the man who led us through fire. Today, we stand behind him just like he once stood in front of us. Ezrue. No one in the auditorium fully understood what was happening, but every head began to turn. And Sarah, she understood. Not everyone can make a SEAL stand, but if anyone deserved it, it was him. The quiet soldier with a handwritten invitation tucked in his left breast pocket. Not to show off, but to keep a promise. Silence blanketed the room, as if time itself had been suspended in that moment. Phones that had been raised to record video quietly lowered. The idle murmurs stopped cold. Now, every eye in the auditorium turned toward the man standing near the exit. The man who just moments ago had been mistaken for someone who didn't belong. Then, from the row to the left of the stage, an older man slowly rose to his feet. His gray military dress uniform shimmered with medals across his chest, making him impossible to miss, even though he hadn't yet spoken. All attention shifted to him. The entire room held its breath. "I know who he is," the man said, his voice low and steady, each word delivered with the weight of long-held memory. "His name is Michael Grant, Master Sergeant, 3rd Recon Battalion, United States Marine Corps." A few audible gasps spread through the room. Some turned to each other, stunned, but the old colonel didn't stop. He took a step forward, his eyes never leaving the soldier standing still against the wall. In 2007, in Kandahar during Operation Firewatch, watched this man run into a burning building. Under direct fire aim at our position. He didn't go in once. He went in 5 times. And each time, he pulled one of our men out of death's grip. The air grew heavy, thick enough to feel. No one moved. No one spoke. He didn't wait for orders. Didn't ask for permission. He just knew, if he didn't go back in, there'd be no one left to bring home. The colonel's voice cracked slightly. Then he finished with a sentence that tightened every chest in the auditorium. He was the only one to walk out of that fire, because he carried the rest of us out on his back. Sarah Thompson felt a chill run down her spine. She looked at the man the guards had tried to escort out, still standing in place, hands calmly clasped behind him, head slightly bowed. No display. No rebuttal. No need for affirmation. He didn't need to say a word, because those who knew the truth had already stood up for him. And for the first time in that entire ceremony, everyone understood. This wasn't just a father here to watch his son graduate. This was a symbol of courage, one that society had, for far too long, left standing in the back. No one gave a signal. There was no change in stage lighting. No dramatic music cue. Just a single figure in a navy blue graduation gown stepping out from behind the curtain, walking quickly, but without urgency. It was Ethan Grant. He didn't scan the crowd. He didn't beam like the other graduates waiting for their moment. His eyes went straight to the floor beneath the stage, where a man in a worn military uniform stood alone under the red exit light. Ethan's hand gripped the microphone. His eyes shimmered with held-back tears, but his voice was steady. "That's my father." A simple sentence, but in a room frozen by the revelations just moments ago, his words hit like a declaration that rewrote everything. Ethan didn't wait for applause. He didn't pause for reaction. He continued. "I'm proud today, but not because of this diploma, not because I'm being honored on this stage. I'm proud because of him." His gaze locked onto his father, holding back the emotion rising in his chest. Every morning before school, he would tell me, stand tall, keep walking. Become the man you'll be proud to meet in the mirror. His voice was slow, but clear. People in the front rows began to whisper. Some graduates bowed their heads, visibly moved by his words. Ethan stepped down from the podium. Without hesitation, he walked off the stage, through the aisles, and stopped in front of the man who just minutes ago had nearly been escorted out. He raised his hand and saluted him with all the reverence a soldier gives a commander. Michael, grandfather, Marine, veteran, didn't salute back. He stepped forward and pulled his son into a hug. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't staged. But no one in the room could look away, because it was real, and it carried something no speech ever could. A silent sacrifice finally acknowledged. Behind them, the 6 Navy SEALs raised their hands and saluted their former leader. No introductions, no commands, just crisp, precise military movements and absolute respect. And then, like a ripple spreading from heart to heart, the entire auditorium stood up. No one asked them to. No one led them. But everyone understood. The man once denied a seat was now receiving the respect of an entire generation. After that quiet embrace between a father and his newly graduated son, no one spoke. They didn't have to. The silence was so deep you could hear the held breath of a hall once filled with noise. Michael Grant didn't rush. He walked slowly beside Ethan, down an aisle now parted like a path paved not by orders, but by reverence. Those who once turned away, those who never even looked at him, now rose to their feet, stepped aside, heads slightly bowed, as if silently saying the apology they never had a chance to speak. And finally, he took his seat. Second row, center, right in front of the stage. The very seat he'd been denied just minutes before. But this time, no one checked for a pass. No one asked for a name. There was just space, made open by people who had finally recognized what was right. Behind him, the 6 SEALs stood at attention. They didn't return to their seats. They didn't need to. Their place was behind him, just as it had been on battlefields long ago. The ceremony resumed. But it wasn't the same ceremony anymore. The dean's voice trembled slightly as he returned to the microphone. We are honored to welcome guests we should have recognized much sooner. The applause that followed wasn't for the school, not for degrees, not even for tradition. It was for one man who entered with nothing more than a handwritten note in his pocket and left with the reverence of the entire hall. After the ceremony, students passed by his seat one by one. Some shook his hand. Others gently placed a hand on his shoulder, then walked on in silence. One girl leaned in and whispered through tears, "Thank you for bringing them home." He said nothing, just nodded softly, because he didn't come to be applauded. He came to keep a promise to his son. To sit in the row his boy once wrote in shaky blue ink, "Dad, I want you in the front row." When the crowd had cleared, when the lights had dimmed, when the applause had faded into memory, he still sat there, silent, still, complete, not because he'd claimed a seat, but because the world around him had finally seen him with eyes of truth, not assumption. Michael Grant didn't walk into that ceremony with medals or rank. He walked in with a promise written by a son, and that was all he needed to be there. No demands, no complaints, just patience, the kind only a man who survived war can understand. Never judge someone by how they appear, because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who sacrificed the most for the peace you now enjoy. Kindness doesn't have to speak, but when it shows up, at the right time, in the right place, it can change an entire generation. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment. I will not forget him. And don't forget to subscribe to help us share stories where gratitude becomes the light in a world that too often forgets.